Hello everybody. Today we will talk about the second lecture in neuroscience module. What is the title of this lecture today? Is spinal cord. Spinal cord subdivided into two parts, gray matter and white matter. In the first session in this lecture we will talk about gray matter, then after that we will talk about white matter. You must know at first that nervous tissue is subdivided into two types. The first type is called central nervous system and the second type is called peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system is subdivided into different structures. The first one is cerebrum, cerebellum, brainstem and spinal cord. Spinal cord, you must know multiple points as regards spinal cord. Number one, that spinal cord has no internal segmentation. This is the first point you must know. They are subdivided, the spinal cord is subdivided into 31 pairs of nerve fibers, but external segmentation, not internal segmentation, as I have mentioned before. What about the segments of spinal cord? Spinal cord is segmented into 8 cervical segments, then 12 thoracic segment, followed by 5 lumbar segment, then 5 sacral segments, and finally 1 coccygeal segment. What about the shape of spinal cord? Spinal cord shows two enlargement. If you see spinal cord in flash state and in cadaver, okay, you can notice that it has two enlargements. The first enlargement present above, which is cervical enlargement, and the innervation of this part or this enlargement is to innervate the upper limb. And the boundary, so again cervical enlargement is to innervate the upper limb, and its extension is from the 4th cervical segment till the 1st thoracic segment. So it extends from C4 till T1. And the lumbar enlargement is to innervate and give nerve supply for the lower limb, which extend from the first lumbar to the 3rd sacral, so its extension is from L1 to S3. If you see here on the right side the segment of the spinal cord, you can notice that the first segment from above to below is cervical, then thoracic, then lumbar, then sacral. Okay, at the end of the spinal cord, this is called conus medullaris. Here we will talk about the spinal nerves. Spinal nerves, there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. As I have mentioned before, that they are subdivided into 8 cervical segments, followed by 12 thoracic segments, then 5 lumbar segments, then 5 sacral segment, and finally end by first 1 coccygeal segment. They are attached to the spinal cord by 2 roots. The first root is dorsal root, which is present posteriorly, and the second root is called ventral root, which is present anteriorly. So the dorsal root is posterior root. This is the other name of each root of this type or this root, and the ventral root is called anterior root. As regards dorsal root, which is present posteriorly here on the diagram, it is purely sensory. So it's called afferent nerve fiber and has dorsal root ganglion. As regards ventral root, present anteriorly, this is purely motor. So it's called efferent nerve fiber. What about external features of spinal cord? The spinal cord is formed of 2 symmetrical halves. So look at this diagram, please. On this diagram on the right side, we can see that it is the spinal cord. It's formed of 2 halves which are symmetrical to each other, the same, separated by posterior median septum, present posteriorly, or dorsal median sulcus, and its outer surface show fissures and sulci. You must know the name of these fissures and sulci. Number 1, posterior median sulcus from posterior aspect, then posterior intermediate posterior intermediate sulcus, then posterior lateral sulcus, then anterior lateral sulcus, then anterior median fissure. Okay, as regards the internal structure of spinal cord, you notice here on these diagrams that it's formed of inner core and outer cover. The inner core of the spinal cord itself is called gray matter. Gray matter here is in the shape of H-shaped, which is surrounded by white matter around it, covering it. So the pale area or white area, which takes the H shape here, this is gray matter, and the black area surrounding it is called white matter. Spinal cord gray matter. You must know what are the components or structures present inside the gray matter. Gray matter consists of nerve cells, number one. There are multiple nerve cells or several nerve cells inside the gray matter. So it's called nuclei. They are arranged in groups. So they are called nuclei because the nerve cell containing inside the nucleus of the neurons. Containing also their process, the process of these nerve cells, which are unmyelinated nerve fibers. Containing another structure, which is neuroglia. What about neuroglia? You know that neuroglia, they are supporting cells which present around the nerve cell for support. And finally, we can find in the gray matter that there are blood vessels, several blood vessels or many blood vessels to give the blood supply for these structures which are present inside the gray matter. Here we can see that H&E stained section, the neurons which are star in shape or irregular in shape, the nuclei present inside, these are surrounded by connective neurons, neuropil, and so on. And the white matter, this is the peripheral area which present at the periphery of the photo or the diagram and labeled by axons. What about white matter? You know that the structure of the gray matter was containing the nerve neurons itself with nuclei. So white matter containing the axon of these neurons, which are myelinated nerve fibers or axon. They containing also neuroglia, which are supporting cells. They containing also blood vessels for supply of blood for this structure. It's around the gray matter. The white matter surround the gray matter. This is number one. Its white color is due to presence of high proportion of myelinated nerve fiber. So it takes the name of white matter. It's called white matter because it's white in color. It's white in color because it contains a high proportion of myelinated nerve fibers. Here we can see on the right side this flesh spinal cord in fleshy state, the H shape which is brown in the center and surrounded by white area. This is called white matter. Spinal cord gray matter, as I have mentioned before, that containing it takes the H shape. Okay, these H shapes subdivided into anterior horn, which present anteriorly, and posterior horn, which present posteriorly, and lateral horn if present in some segments and not present in another segments. As regard the two posterior horn, they are sensory nuclei containing inside the sensory nuclei or nuclei of nerve cells which are sensory. As regard anterior horn, containing inside motor nuclei, and the lateral horn present only in thoracic segment, which extend from T1 or first thoracic, then lumbar 3 or third lumbar segment. Here we can see that there is depression in the anterior aspect of the spinal cord. This is called anterior sulcus, okay? But this area, which is dotted by the color of red, This is gray commissure which is surrounding the central canal. What about the nuclei in spinal cord gray matter? Nuclei in the dorsal horn, I have mentioned that they are sensory nuclei. What about the number? They are 5 in number. The first one from posterior to anterior, okay, I will explain them from posterior to anterior. The first one posteriorly is called nucleus posteromarginalis. It covers the tip of the posterior horn, okay. It's labeled by the red arrow which present above. It present in all segments of spinal cord. It receives pain and temperature fibers. As regards the second nucleus is called substantia gelatinosa of Rolandi. It present in the apex of the posterior horn. This is number 1, you must know. Number 2, you must know that it present in all segments. Number 3, it receives pain and temperature and light touch. What about the third one? It's called nucleus proprius dorsalis or main sensory nucleus. Main sensory nucleus present anterior to substantia gelatinosa in all segments. I can find it, and it receives pain, temperature, and light touch also. As regards the nuclei in spinal cord, be continued. The fourth one is called Clark's nucleus. What about Clark's nucleus? Clark's nucleus labeled by the red arrow here. It extends only from C8 till L3. So again, Clark's nucleus extends from C8 to L3. That it extends from 8 cervical segments till 3rd lumbar segment. It present in the base of the posterior horn. What about the structure of Clark's nucleus? It contains inside large multipolar cells with prominent nestle granules and eccentric nucleus. Clark's nucleus, as regards the function of it receives afferent nerve fibers from muscle spindle, and its axons form dorsal spinocerebellar tract, which is unconscious proprioceptive tract, responsible for unconscious proprioception. It is homologous to what or similar to what? Similar to accessory cingulate nucleus which is present in the medulla of the brainstem. As regards the fifth one is called nucleus reticularis. Nucleus reticularis labeled by the black arrow here on the diagram. It is located lateral to the Clark's nucleus as I can see on the diagram, and it present in all segments of spinal cord, can be found in all segments of spinal cord. Okay. What about the nuclei in the intermediate gray matter? In the intermediate gray matter, we can see 3 nuclei, plus or minus 1. The first one of these 3 nuclei is called the posterior commissural nucleus. Okay, labeled on the diagram here, posterior commissural nucleus. It present in the gray commissure, but on the posterior aspect, so from its name, it is called posterior commissural nucleus. It present in all segments of the spinal cord. As regard the anterior commissural nucleus, it present also in the gray commissure, but on the anterior aspect. Can be found where? Can be found in all segments. Axon from intersegmental tract, containing axons from intersegmental tracts. What about the third one? The third one is called intermediomedial nucleus. Where is the site? It present lateral to the central canal. Okay. It receive visceral afferent nerve fibers. What about the last one, which may be absent or may present? The last one is called intermediolateral nucleus. What about the site? It can be found in the lateral horn of thoracic and upper lumbar segments. They give preganglionic sympathetic fibers. Okay, so intermediolateral nucleus not present in all segments of spinal cord, but can be found only in thoracic and lumbar segments. As regard motor nuclei of the anterior horn, they are subdivided into two groups, medial group and lateral group. As regard medial group, it consists of multiple nuclei. The first one is anteromedial and the second one is posteromedial. So, on the diagram here, on the anterior horn, I can see that the medial group formed of two nuclei, one which is present anteriorly and on the medial aspect of the anterior horn, which is called anteromedial, and the opposite one present posteriorly and also present on the medial aspect, which is called the posteromedial nucleus. What about lateral group? Lateral group consists of multiple nuclei, which are anterior nucleus, present most anterior one, central nucleus, which present in between the group which present in the anterior horn at all, central nucleus, then anterolateral nucleus, which present anteriorly but on the lateral aspect of anterior horn, then posterolateral nucleus, which present posteriorly but on the lateral aspect of the anterior horn also, and the most posterior one, which present posterior to posterolateral nucleus, is called retroposterolateral nucleus. Lamination of the gray matter. The scientists make lamination for the spinal cord for the gray matter to organize them into laminae. These laminae are subdivided into 10 types from first to 10. Lamina 1 containing inside the nucleus, which is posteromarginal nucleus. Lamina 2 containing inside substantia gelatinosa. Lamina 3 containing main sensory nucleus. Lamina 4 containing main sensory nucleus also. As regard lamina 5, the lateral part of it contain lateral reticular nucleus, as lamina 6 containing inside interneural neurons. Lamina 7 contain Clark's nucleus and intermedial nucleus and intermediolateral nucleus. As regard lamina 8 containing inside medial group anterior horn cell. Lamina 9 containing medial and lateral group of anterior horn cell, and lamina 10 containing inside gray matter around the spinal central canal. Gray matter, lamina of Rixed. Here we can see the laminae, as I have mentioned, from posterior to anterior, arranged lamina 1, the most posterior one, followed by lamina 2, followed by lamina 3, followed by lamina 4, lamina 5, lamina 6, lamina 7 between anterior posterior horn, then lamina 8 present medially on the anterior horn, in the anterior horn, and lamina 9 which present laterally and anterior in the anterior horn, and finally lamina 10 which present around the central canal. Here we can see that the nucleus proprius or main sensory nucleus is labeled by two arrows. These arrows coming from what? From lamina 3 and lamina 4. That means that nucleus proprius present in two laminae, which are lamina 2 and lamina 3. Here we can see that Clark's nucleus is labeled by the red arrow here. Here we can see the lamina also, and lamina 10 which is around the central canal as I mentioned before. The title of this diagram say subdivisions of the gray matter of spinal cord. The left half of the figure shows the cell groups which usually described. The right half shows the newer concept of laminae. Be continued in the lamina or laminae of the gray matter. Here we can see the same laminae as I have mentioned, but lamina 8 is labeled here, lamina 9, which contain the anterior and lateral aspect of anterior horn, and lamina 10, very characteristic to it that it contains a central canal surrounded by gray matter around. Let's go to the second part in our lecture today, which is called white matter. What about the white matter? Let's remember gray matter before. Gray matter was consisting of nerve cells, which are arranged in groups in the form of nuclei, and their processes, which are unmyelinated nerve fibers. What is the meaning of unmyelinated nerve fibers? This means that it is not covered by myelin sheath. Then remember that gray matter consists of neuroglia, which are supporting cell, and finally containing blood vessels. So let's discuss white matter. About the histological structure of the white matter, as I have mentioned before, it is white in color because high proportion of myelinated nerve fibers inside. Containing what? Containing myelinated nerve fiber, which takes the name of tracts, containing also neuroglia and blood vessels for blood supply. It is labeled by the red arrow here. This is a dark area which containing nerve fiber surrounding the H-shaped gray matter. What about the gray matter on this, white matter on this? So again, as regards spinal cord white matter, we can see here that on the diagram it is subdivided into three lateral part, and anterior and posterior. The most anterior part is called anterior white column, which take another name, which is anterior funiculus. On the lateral aspect, we can see lateral white column, which is called lateral funiculus, and the most posterior aspect called posterior funiculus or posterior white matter, white column. Here we can see that spinal nerve in relation to the spinal cord, gray matter take the H shape, as you know, anterior aspect and posterior aspect, or anterior horn and posterior horn. The anterior horn arises from its motor part or motor root, and posterior aspect receive sensory root. Both motor and sensory root combine to each other to form spinal nerve, which is mixed. So what is the meaning of mixed nerve? Spinal nerve is mixed nerve. That means it contains both divisions, sensory and motor nerve fibers. The dorsal root ganglion. You must know that the dorsal root ganglion, it is the first order neuron for all sensations. It contains 3 types of cells. Okay, what about the 3 types of cells which are present here? They are, so again, we will talk about the dorsal root ganglion. Here we know that it contains 3 types of cells: small cells, medium-sized cells, and large cells. As regards small cells, they receive pain and temperature sensation. As regards medium-sized cells, they receive touch sensation. What about large cells? It receives sensation which are proprioceptive. Here we can see on the diagram that the posterior horn, posterior division of spinal nerve pass to enter this aspect. It contains medial division and lateral division. It's formed of 2 divisions. Medial division containing large fibers, between 2 brackets here, and the lateral division containing small fibers which arrive to enter to the posterior horn here. As regard dorsal root of spinal nerve, it's formed of 3 types of fibers. What about these 3 types of fibers? They are thin unmyelinated nerve fibers, and medium-sized myelinated nerve fibers, and thick myelinated nerve fibers. As regards thin unmyelinated nerve fibers, they are responsible for carrying pain and temperature sensation. Meanwhile, as regards medium-sized myelinated fibers, they carry touch sensation. As regards thick myelinated nerve fibers, they are responsible for carrying proprioceptive sensation. Before the dorsal root of spinal nerve enters the spinal cord, they are subdivided or divided into two branches, as I have said. The lateral division and the medial division. Lateral division carries pain and temperature, and medial division carries proprioceptive and touch sensation, as I have mentioned before. You know that the white matter of spinal cord is formed of myelinated nerve fibers inside. These myelinated nerve fibers are called tracts. So you must know what is the meaning of the tract. The tract is a bundle of nerve fibers. So it's formed of multiple nerve fibers. These nerve fibers have the same origin and the same pathway and the same termination and perform the same function. That means these nerve fibers passing with each other from the start till all the way till the end and perform the same function together. As regards the tract of the spinal cord, they are subdivided into two types. The first type is called long tracts and the second type is called short tracts. As regards the long tracts, they are also subdivided into two another types, which are ascending and descending tracts. Ascending tracts are subdivided into two types. These two types, which present in the ascending tracts, are called proprioceptive tracts and exteroceptive tracts. Proprioceptive tracts responsible for carrying the sense of possession and movement, which is called kinesthesis. As regards the another type of the tract, which is called exteroceptive tracts, carry the sensation like touch, pressure, pain, and temperature. As regards descending tracts, they are subdivided into also two types, which are pyramidal and extrapyramidal tracts. Pyramidal tracts originate from the cerebral cortex, and extrapyramidal tracts originate from brainstem nuclei. So the difference between pyramidal and extrapyramidal, that pyramidal, the origin of these tracts from cerebral cortex, but the origin of extrapyramidal tracts from the brainstem. And another type of tract, which are the tract of spinal cord, is called short tracts, as I have said before. So let's talk about long tracts, which are subdivided into ascending and descending. The first one in ascending is proprioceptive tract, as I have said before. Proprioceptive tract carry proprioception, which reach to the subconscious level or conscious level. The tracts which carry proprioception that reach conscious level or cerebrum, they are carried by gracile and cuneate tract. However, proprioception that reaches the subconscious level or cerebellum, they are carried by dorsal spinocerebellar pathway, ventral spinocerebellar pathway, cuneo-cerebellar pathway, and finally spino-olivary pathway. So, conscious level or conscious tract, which carry proprioception to the conscious, are called gracile and cuneate. However, the proprioception which reach subconscious level are carried by dorsal spinocerebellar pathway, ventral spinocerebellar pathway, cuneo-cerebellar pathway, and finally spino-olivary pathway or tract. As regard ascending tract, which are long tract ascending tract exteroceptive and proprioceptive. We have discussed the proprioceptive tract, so let's go to discuss exteroceptive tract. The exteroceptive tract are subdivided into lateral spinothalamic tract, ventral spinothalamic tract, spinotectal tract, and spino-reticular tract. Tract of spinal cord again, descending tract, which arise from the anterior horn. They are subdivided into pyramidal and extrapyramidal. You know that pyramidal tract originate where? Originate from cerebral cortex. Okay, it's subdivided into three tracts: pyramidal tract, which arise from the cerebral cortex, giving three branches or three pathways. Lateral corticospinal, here we can see on the diagram that on the lateral aspect, lateral corticospinal tract, on the anterior aspect, anterior corticospinal tract, and in between lateral and anterior is called anterolateral corticospinal tract. Okay, let's continue descending tracts. You know that descending tracts are subdivided into two types, extrapyramidal and pyramidal. You know also that the pyramidal tract arises from cerebral cortex, and extrapyramidal now arise from brainstem nuclei. So, extrapyramidal tracts which are originated from the brainstem nuclei are called rubrospinal tract, tectospinal tract, vestibulospinal tract, reticulospinal, and medial longitudinal bundle. Here on the diagram, we can see that this is a very nice diagram to demonstrate that pyramidal and extrapyramidal tract are extrapyramidal on the right side are rubrospinal, reticulospinal, vestibulospinal, and tectospinal. Meanwhile, on the left side, pyramidal are corticospinal and corticopulbar. What about short tracts? You know that short tracts, they are four subtypes. The first one is called Lissauer tract. Second one is called coma-shaped tract. Third one is called septomarginal tract. And the last one is called fasciculus proprius tract. In this diagram, we can see that Lissauer tract present between the posterior horn and the periphery of spinal cord. Coma-shaped tract present between gracile and coniate tract and take the shape of coma. Septomarginal tract present at the middle and the posterior aspect of the white matter. Meanwhile, fasciculus proprius tract surrounding the gray matter. Now we will discuss very important characters of each level of spinal cord. As regards the first segment in spinal cord, which is called cervical segment, you can see that the outline of this segment is broad, okay, or oval structure. Inside this is the gray matter, which is surrounded by white matter also. The gray matter, you can see that it's formed of anterior horn and posterior horn as usual, but anterior horn is thick and posterior horn is thin. You can notice also that the white matter containing inside several tracts. On the right side, you can see the ascending tracts, which are from posterior to anterior, are dorsal spinocerebellar, followed by ventral spinocerebellar in front of it, then lateral spinothalamic on the medial aspect of ventral spinocerebellar, then anterior spinothalamic present most anteriorly, and in between anterior and lateral, you can notice here that there are two tracts which are spinotectal and spino-olivary between anterior spinothalamic and lateral spinothalamic. On the other side, on the left side, you can see descending tracts which are pyramidal tract, which is called lateral corticospinal, take the shape of the pyramid, in front of it rubrospinal tract. As regards the anterior aspect of the spinal cord, you can notice that there are medial longitudinal bundle or medial longitudinal funiculus, followed by anteriorly anterior corticospinal, then tectospinal anteriorly and pontine reticulospinal posteriorly. Then laterally we can find that vestibulospinal present on the anterior aspect and medullary reticulospinal present on the posterior aspect. Here we can discuss thoracic segment of spinal cord. You can notice that the outline is rounded, smaller than cervical segment. You can notice at the gray matter that anterior horn is thin and the posterior horn is thin also. The lateral aspect, you can notice of the white matter that the same tract are found dorsal spinocerebellar, ventral spinocerebellar, lateral spinothalamic, ventral spinothalamic, and in between of them spinotectal posteriorly and spino-olivary anteriorly. Meanwhile, you can notice on the left side that pyramidal tract or lateral corticospinal. Lateral corticospinal can be found rubrospinal in front of it, but what other tract can be found here? We can see that anterior corticospinal found and pontine reticulospinal also can be found, and vestibulospinal and medullary reticulospinal. We can notice that posterior aspect of white matter containing gracile and cuneate tract. As regard lumbar level of spinal cord, you can notice that the outline is broad than thoracic. You can notice that the gray matter anterior horn is thick and posterior horn is thick also. You can notice on the posterior aspect of white matter or white column, you can see that gracile tract only present, cuneate is absent here. On the lateral aspect or lateral and anterior funiculus of white column, you can see that ventral spinocerebellar and lateral spinothalamic and anterior spinothalamic and the spinotectal and spinoolivary only can be found. Meanwhile, on the descending tract on the left side can be seen here lateral corticospinal, rubrospinal, and medullary reticulospinal, vestibulospinal, and pontine reticulospinal. This comparison is very important to compare between the levels of spinal cord. What about the levels of spinal cord? You have cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral and coccygeal. But this table discuss the differences between cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral. As regards the size, what about the size? Cervical is large in size, thoracic is small, lumbar is large, and sacral is small. So, large, small, large, small. As regards the shape, cervical is oval in shape, meanwhile thoracic is rounded, lumbar is rounded but broad, sacral is rounded also. What about anterior horn and posterior horn? Posterior horn in cervical segment is thin and divergent. In thoracic segment is thin also. In lumbar segment is thick. In sacral segment is thick. What about anterior horn? In cervical segment, I can find that anterior horn is thick. Meanwhile, in thoracic segment is thin. Lumbar anterior horn is thick, and sacral anterior horn is thick also. What about lateral horn, present or absent? In cervical segment, not present. In lumbar segment, not present. In sacral segment, not present. However, it present only in the thoracic segment. So, cervical, lateral horn, no. Thoracic segment, lateral horn, no. Thoracic segment is present. Lumbar segment, lateral horn, no. Sacral segment, lateral horn is also no. What about the white matter? The white matter in cervical segment is greater in amount, but thoracic less than cervical, in lumbar less than cervical, and sacral is few. What about the central canal, the position of central canal? In the cervical segment, it is anterior in position. However, in thoracic segment is shifted dorsally. In lumbar segment, present at the center, so it is central in position. And sacral segment, the same position as central canal is central in position. I'd like to inform you that this comparison is very important. After the lecture, let's answer this question and test yourself. Which one of the following is a sensory nucleus? Anteromedial, Clark's nucleus, lateral nucleus, or central nucleus? The sensory nucleus is Clark's nucleus. Excellent. Which one of the following is a motor nucleus here? Postromarginal, Clark's nucleus, central nucleus, or nucleus proprius? What is the correct answer? Yes, the motor nucleus is central nucleus. Nucleus proprius correspond to which of the following lamina? Lamina 1 and 2, lamina 2 and 3, lamina 3 and 4, lamina 4 and 5. Yes, nucleus proprius present in lamina 3 and 4. The last question, lamina 2 correspond to which of the following nuclei? Substantia gelatinosa, main sensory nucleus, lateral nucleus, reticular nucleus. What is the correct answer? Yes, substantia gelatinosa nucleus. Thank you so much and thank you for listening. Good luck.